Love, Philosophical, Theological, Psychological Perspectives. Week 9, Buddhist Perspectives. We're looking at Pema Chodron, who was an abbess at Gampo Abbey in Cape Breton, Canada, and Thich Nhat Hanh, the abbot of a Buddhist community, Plum Village in France. Both of these are helpful because they're both very good teachers and communicators. Buddhism has many lineages and can be very complex, and they have a way of really communicating it simply and also focusing on the development of compassion and love, which is, of course, the purpose of this course. So you see the quote there, just as with her own life, a mother shields from hurt her own son, her only child, let all embracing thoughts for all beings be yours. So there's this interconnectivity, this interresponsibility that we all have for one another and for those who cross our paths. Almost all the various lineages in Buddhism, all of them actually, trace their lineage to Siddhartha Gautama Buddha. And the story of Siddhartha was that he was a wealthy man and a wealthy prince, and he lived in the confines of a safe kingdom. And he got bored and he got curious, and he leaped over the wall on 3 different occasions. And on each occasion, he discovered an affliction that humanity has to face. First of all, the shortness of our life, the fact that we will die, old age, the fact that we get sick and infirmed, and the fact that we will all die one day, and everyone we know will die. And that's not necessarily something to be morbidly attached to. That's something we need to be aware of. So the Buddhism will say that the diagnosis of our suffering comes from the fact that we're ignorant of our condition, of these 3 sources, or these 3 realities, that we misperceive, or we deny it, or we deny it, and so we get attached to other things, or we get distracted by our own cravings. And all of that prevents us from really facing the conditions of our finitude and limitations as human beings. But for him, the prognosis is hopeful because people can find liberation from ignorance, perception, attachment, craving. The therapy is to follow the Eightfold Path. Now, all this can be boiled down to what's called the 4 Noble Truths. The fact of dukkha, that suffering exists, and that the source of this suffering is craving or misperception or ignorance. They're all linked together. To get rid of this craving, ignorance, misperception, you have to get rid of suffering. How do you get rid of suffering? You get rid of craving, misperception, ignorance by following the Eightfold Path. Now, the Eightfold Path is right understanding, right thinking, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right concentration, and right mindfulness. And this is where the various lineages in Buddhism are going to diverge on their interpretation of this. But the experience of the Buddha, the 4 Noble Truths, tend to be the foundational teachings in Buddhism. The Eightfold Path is where there can be different interpretations. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but just think about, for example, right speech. Certainly, do you lie? If you lie, you're not practicing right speech. If you lie to yourself, that can be even more serious for Pema Chodron, at least. Or do you exaggerate? So right speech is going to focus on speaking the truth as it is. Now, certainly a lot of our humor is based on exaggeration and that kind of thing. They're not saying that Buddhists should always be very serious. There's a lot of humor and lightness. But right speech gets at speaking the truth, not exaggerating the truth, not concealing the truth. Traditionally, the Eightfold Path has been divided into three components. So there's an ethics, shila, of not harming. So I don't harm people with my actions or my livelihood or my speech. So you can think about that's really the way we can harm. Now livelihood might think I need to rethink what I'm doing for a living if that's participating in directly harming people. And of course, each person has to decide for themselves because each person has to deal with their own karma. And at the end of the day, they have to live with their conscience. Secondly, mental discipline, samadhi, where you have right effort or right thinking, right mindfulness, right meditation, concentration. A lot of mindfulness meditation, or a lot of the popularization of Buddhism in the secular community has focused on the psychological aspects of mental discipline. But in Buddhist traditions, you would not necessarily want to take mental discipline and leave the other three. But a lot of people do that in mindfulness training. And that's okay if it is promoting you to be a more loving and compassionate person. Wisdom, prajna, right view or right understanding, and right intention, diligence. You set the intention that all beings be free of suffering and the root of all suffering. Certainly you can't cause that to happen on your own, but you can set the intention. And setting the intention out there is part of animating it into existence, even if in a small way through your own intention. Now, two concrete examples or practices that you can bring about to increase your compassionate heart. What is called bodhicitta, the tender heart. And you can practice building your tender heart, expanding it to include more and more compassion towards people. One of the ways you can do it is through Tonglen breathing. Tonglen is literally taking in and giving out. So for example, say you come across somebody in the marketplace who looks disappointed, or let's say you're experiencing disappointment. You can say, breathing in for everyone who is disappointed, breathing out reassurance to them. Or in this day and age, if there tends to be a lot of anxiety in the world, you say, breathing in for everyone who feels anxious, breathing out reassurance to them. If I'm feeling anxiety, doesn't matter what it is, I want to breathe in for everyone who's feeling anxiety. I want to breathe out reassurance to them. Now, this is just a practice. I encourage you to try it to see if it doesn't make you feel better. It's medicine. It's part of the medicine to human suffering. Part of the reason it works is because I'm shifting from my own thinking about my own suffering and problems and realizing that out of the 7 billion people on the planet right now, somebody else has got to be feeling this, and I want to commune with them. And in doing so, I assuage my own suffering and possibly assuage their suffering. This is related to the notion of klesha, or attachment, and the notion of shempa, which is the energy underneath the attachment. And it can be positive or negative. I can have a lot of shempa when the Toronto Maple Leafs finally win a game. Or I can have a lot of negative shempa if they lose. But the shempa is simply energy. The klesha is the attachment that has its strength because the strength of the shempa. So what they'll suggest is when you're feeling really, say, a lot of animosity towards somebody, you become aware that you're feeling the animosity. You get rid of the scenario of what they may be doing to perpetuate that animosity. That's a construction in my mind. And I just say, oh, I'm feeling animosity. Well, what does that animosity feel like? Where do I feel it? Forget why I'm feeling the animosity. Where in my spirit do I feel it? Well, do I feel it a little bit in my chest? Is it in my diaphragm? What does it feel like? And then you're starting to get to the shempa. Breathing in, I'm aware of the shempa. Breathing out, giving it space, room. Breathing in for everyone who may be feeling animosity right now. Breathing out relief to them. And you find that the shempa is like clouds passing over the blue sky. And sometimes the skies can be very dark and cloudy. But you come as you're aware of your shempa and breathing it in, you're aware that it's going to pass. And so you start to get to the sense of openness or even emptiness. The shunyata, that's not bad news. The fact that you're feeling the openness and emptiness. You just be in the space. A second one comes from Thich Nhat Hanh. The first one is one I get from Pema Chodron. But Thich Nhat Hanh has this simple meditation that when you're feeling a lot of anxiety or anger or fear, because this is the root of violence, this is the root of hatred. And getting centered, conversely, is the root of compassion, because I can be present to someone. I can be present to their problems. I can be empathetic. I can help them. But I begin with getting centered myself. Breathing in, breathing out. Deeply, slowly. Calm. Breathing out, ease. Breathing in, I smile. Breathing out, I release. Breathing in, present moment. Breathing out, wonderful moment. So this is a very simple exercise that one can use to get centered so that one can be present to another. And being present to one another, we can be loving to one another. So try these two exercises, especially in moments during the day when you may be being afflicted by negative feelings.